Hi everybody. It looks like we are live. According to the little gadget in the corner, it's counting up this little eye with looks like 30 odd people already, which is great news. This is the first one I've done that's not in the evening, so I'm trying to with these webinars pop on a couple of times a week just to give some people some value in terms of some tips and advice and a little bit about what we do as a training academy. But yeah, so trying to work out what's the best time of day. So certainly this time seems popular, which is good news. So I'll give it a sort of 10 seconds or so to let a few people catch up because it's 12:01. So we'll start shortly. But so what I'm planning to cover today, apart from my normal intro about me and a little bit about Beyond the Lens Academy, is a couple of things really. One is what I call capturing the moment, which may seem obvious, but I'll touch on how I deal with that in photography terms, and also dealing with bad light. And bad light isn't always about dark and not bright light. It's quite often the opposite, which is what I was dealing with at the weekend in terms of very harsh lighting conditions. So we'll be covering that. So why don't we make a start? Seeing as there's a few people in and it's 2 minutes past. So I'm Carl Thomas. Welcome to Beyond the Lens Academy. I'm a professional dog photographer in my own right. I run a dog photography business and have done for 5 years. And so I know what it's like to go through the journey of learning how to use the camera from basic right up to professional level. So got lots of experience to add and share. In terms of Beyond the Lens Academy, it's been set up for photographers by a photographer, with the main aim of being somewhere where people can get advice and help irrespective of what level they're at, whether a beginner who's just bought a camera or an advanced person with a high-end camera and they're a pro, and everybody in between, frankly. And it was set up because in my experience, the sort of journey I went through, I went on various different webinars, I paid for different programs, I did different workshops. Some were very good, some were not so good, and some were frankly a waste of money. So I wanted to, I've been thinking about doing this for some time now, well over a year, and now we're live and we've got people in, which is great. So that's why I developed it. And in terms of, briefly what it's about, if you go to the website, which is www.beyondthelensacademy, it kind of tells you. There's a little tab that scrolls down towards the bottom that gives you what's involved in each of the levels. And I'll just briefly flick through it. So direct message facility, tongue-tied, is something that's available in each of the levels. And what's important about that is the ability to direct message me and have a conversation, because not always is watching a webinar or a pre-recorded video or reading some stuff on a PDF enough to answer the questions you want to answer. So yeah, that's definitely there. The next one is a private Facebook group, and that's a great community, growing fast, and it's private, so it's not, you're not going to get trolls on it or anything. But what people use it for is sharing images, getting critiques, getting feedback, sharing successes, asking questions. I'm in there all the time, sort of commenting on those things, occasionally putting up pictures myself and adding some value there. So there's a very powerful little tool there. Online learning modules, that's something that most people would expect for an online training platform of some sort. And there are. The difference is, though, these aren't your normal dull kind of training modules. What they are interactive ones in the sense that they're recorded with members. So the comments and questions that you'll see that come up on the live feed today, the same concept happens in the training modules. So when you're watching them, you'll be able to see what people have asked about. And then when they're finished and they're uploaded into the platform, there's the ability to continue commenting just below where the video is, so you can continue interacting and asking questions, which is good. The mobile, excuse me, mobile app, that's going live this week, which gives people the ability to access all their content on the move, because we're not always sat at our desks looking at stuff that way. Keyword searchable video content, we're just about to start using that now. And what that means is when you're looking at a video that might be half an hour long or an hour long, you can then, if you're trying to find something that you saw when you watched the video, perhaps, you can type in the search. So you can type in aperture or focus settings or background focus, and it will take you to every single part of the video where that word has been used. So a very useful feature, actually. Took a while to get sorted out. Weekly group webinars, that's an area where it kind of is what it says, really. So we get the group together, either all together or by sort of membership level, and have a conversation about a specific topic or a specific type of images or some challenges or new photography equipment or the latest gear that's been launched, whatever subject we decide, really, which moves nicely into the next one. And I've been asked, people have said to me, what kind of things have you been helping people within the academy so far, and there's a whole raft of things, and I'll touch on some of that later. But certainly this one, gear reviews, kind of leads into the question I get asked a lot, and have done this past week. I want to upgrade my camera. What camera should I get? Or I want to get a new camera. What camera should I get? I want to get a different lens, and so on. So we spend quite a lot of time in the academy helping people make the right informed choice, because frankly, it can be a minefield. There's so much stuff out there. It's a bit like mobile phone technology. It's moving at such a fast pace. It can be difficult to keep up. So we do quite a lot of that kind of stuff. We do group image critiques. In fact, we're going to do some of those this week, where people will share their share their images, and we'll get sort of feedback and commentary and so on. So that is something I certainly found very valuable in my journey to sort of understand, about my image, because photography is, it's quite a lonely thing. You're out and about on your own. You take your images. You're generally speaking likely to be less pleased with them than perhaps somebody else might be. So having some feedback can be quite a motivator and improve confidence. Another thing that photographers quite often lack. We also do that at the higher levels, usually in the pro, but we are starting to do it in the amateurs as well, where individual one-to-one image critiques. So somebody, so for example, I had a pro on this week who did a photo session, and we had a look at the images before they were published and sort of went through them. And then finally, two more things actually. This one here, which is kind of monthly choose your subject one-to-one, frankly, where we can just get together and have a conversation on a one-to-one basis about anything you like, photography related, and that's proving quite popular. And then last but not least, I run and still run one-to-one photography training and workshops locally here, and so any member of the academy will get discounted or have the ability to join those on a discounted basis, and also get information in relation to when they're coming out before other people do. So that's enough about Beyond the Lens Academy. As I say, go to the website, you'll see this banner here that's there, plus lots of other information about how it is. So let me switch that off, and we'll get into back again, get into kind of what I want to talk about today. So in the comments, hello, hi Paul, hi Sophie, hi Sandra, Megan, all got a first question already. Let's pop it up. There it is. So from Megan, what camera do you use? I use this thing here. Oh, it's a beast. There you go. It's a Canon 1DX. So it's one of Canon's pro cameras. And I love it. You don't necessarily have to spend a fortune on camera gear though. So don't be fooled by thinking that you see my images and you like them, and it's because I've got a very expensive camera. I can take images as good as quality with lower end cameras. One of the benefits of this camera, obviously it takes great image qualities, but it is robust. So it's weather sealed, it's magnesium alloy, so it dents rather than breaks. So yeah, hope that helps out the question, but thank you, Megan. Hi Joe. Right, let's get into some of the things. So I've got a couple of images, well, 3 or 4 I want to share today to use as subject material, if that makes sense. And they kind of cover 2 areas. One is what I call capturing the moment. Hey Tom. And that's all about not doing this. So before I put these up, I'll explain what I mean, because obviously when I put the images up, you can't see me. Well, I don't think you can anyway. So here's my camera. And so I should be spending most of my time doing that, looking through the viewfinder, looking at what's going on in front of me. And one of the things that all photographers do, and you tend to do it more when you're a beginner, is you'll spend time doing this. You'll be looking at the back of the camera, checking settings and stuff. And in the photography world, they call that chimping. And what it effectively means is you're spending time checking the back of the camera, and while that's going on, you're potentially missing action, moments, and potential images. Wildlife's a classic example. The kingfisher may have dived in and got a little minnow when the whole time you're checking your settings. Now, checking your settings is important, certainly. So when you first start taking a series of images, check them. Make sure the images on the back are right, but just have a quick look, and then then you've got it set right. You know what you're doing, and so that's all about capturing the moment. And in order to, hello Alison, there's a few people on today, which is great. Let me just go through some of the images that I've got as a result of not checking the back of my camera. So let's start with one that's not dog related. You'll be pleased to know that this platform is not all about dog photography. That's what I do for a living, but I spend time doing wildlife, landscape. I've done the odd wedding, not something I do a lot of, but I have. And this is from my cousin's wedding some years ago. And this is my niece, very tired. And this is the bottom of my cousin's wedding dress. So I sat on my 7200 And I capture that moment because I saw it. That's all it is. Nothing particularly great about the photo. I mean, it's nice and sharp and a little bit dreamy, but it's about being in the right place at the right time. And so I wouldn't have captured that moment because she was there for literally about 5 seconds, because she was pulling on the dress. So that changed. So, if you're not looking through the viewfinder, you'll miss the moment. And if you and the sooner you become more comfortable with your settings and knowing what to change. So if I, for example, was doing, I mean, this is probably not a good example, but if I was doing some action shots and then suddenly saw this, I'd need to quickly change my settings to get the exposure right. So you need to be able to do that quickly as well, a bit like suddenly having to overtake in a car. You drop down a couple of gears and put your accelerator down. But you don't look at them. You know where your accelerator is and you know where your gear lever is. So let's have a few doggy ones that are kind of the same thing really in terms of capturing the moment. So this is the photo shoot of two labs a few years ago messing around. And what was going on here is we were setting up for, so we'd done some portrait shots, and we were then setting up for some action shots, jumping over that log that you can just see at the bottom of the frame in front of the image. And while I was doing that, I checked up my settings changed, and I was explaining to the client who stood next to me that I wanted to get the dogs to go back 10 meters or a couple of 3 meters, and then for her to call them and they would come jumping over. But I was watching these dogs play and interact and jump up and down, and I captured that moment. Right place, right time. But mainly, I'm looking at my camera and I got my finger on the shutter, or fairly close to it all the time. So that was in the gallery of images that I sent to that client, I think there were about 30. That was a very popular one, and actually continues to be quite popular when I share on Facebook, because people love the sort of interaction. Then it's great for a capturing competition. In fact, I might do that. So I've not done that yet. Now here's another one. Again, it's a doggy, which is not uncommon given what I do. But this is a dog that was towards the end of a photo session and was just sort of effectively cuddling his trainer. And I was just sat there chatting to him, and we were just sort of talking about how the session would, or what the next steps would be. I seem to recall, which is about how I get them the images and stuff. And his dog was just sort of pouring at him, so he just leant down slightly. I can't show you the whole image here because the way it's a 16:9 format on these screens, so I had to sort of crop it a bit to fit nicely. But you've got this lovely sort of bond between the dog and his two paws on the owner's hand, and he's looking at the camera. So, it's not a setup shot. I mean, some shots I try and capture like this, but I can guarantee that trying to capture these, what I call special moment shots, you can tell one that's been set and one that's been captured, if that makes sense. So that's quite good. Then the last one. So I'm quite keen to keep these sessions to sort of half an hour. I've been unsuccessful in that because we get lots of questions, but that's absolutely fine. I don't mind the questions. And then I've got some more images, and we'll talk about horrible light in a minute. So this is a shot I did at the weekend on Saturday, and we were with this lovely little dog called Arlo, 12-week-old pup, and he was, again, we were getting set up. So to the left we were in a little brook. To the left of the image where he's looking is 3 or 4 meters of sort of stream, and where he stood is on the edge of a waterfall. You can probably just see it, just sort of here. And he was a little bit hesitant to step in, but again, rather than wait and look at the settings that I was going to capture when he ran across the waterfall, I was ready to get this shot. And it's that little pensive, what am I going to do kind of shot. And the client absolutely loved it. So that's kind of a brief. I mean, a lot of it's common sense, but you've just got to be ready and not miss it. So let's just look at some of the comments here because it's flashing at me. Hi Phil, hi Sue, hi Alison. Yeah, a few more people. So drop questions in, whenever you feel like it. Obviously, we'll get a few more towards the end typically. But yeah, please do drop them in, so I'll keep coming back to this and checking. Okay, here's a good question from Sheena. Hi Sheena, from down the depths of Devon, Cornwall. How do you always catch the light in the eye? I have so many action shots with dead eyes. It's a good question, and that's something I'm always thinking about. And I guess that comes from the experience, actually. Partly, one of the issues is when you first start, you're spending more time thinking. It's kind of what I was saying in the first part of this webinar. You're spending more time thinking about, have I got the settings right? Have I got the focus right, and all those sort of things. And you're spending less time looking at the image. So, you're, as a result of that, some of your images they may not actually have the catch lights in the eye. They may have some stick in the background that's annoying you, or washing line, or whatever it might be. And as you can become more confident, you'll start to think more about what's in the frame. And it's just a case of making sure you've got the light there. When it comes to dogs, you can't always have catch lights in the eyes, but it certainly makes a difference, and it certainly looks quite well on this one. Hi, Jane. Let's go to another question here from Sue. Do you use evaluation? Sorry, not coronavirus. It's some hay fever thing at the moment. Nightmare. So yeah, do you use? Well, in Canon it's evaluative, but yeah. So the answer is yes. I use that metering section all the time, and again, partly because my type of photography, and we spend more time talking about this in the academy, is all about, if you look at this thing, it's a Canon 1DX. Oh, you can't see it, but you might be able to on the screen if I put it up. I think there should be a little screen in the corner. But there's loads of buttons, loads of settings, lots of stuff. And I like to work in terms of my process of just playing with as few settings as possible. So rather than use evaluative metering and then swap it to partial metering or center weighted metering in different lighting conditions, I just compensate for the lighting conditions by overexposing slightly or underexposing slightly if the sort of the image requires it. So hope that helps. What's this one here? Let's have a look. Megan Smith, another question. Can you share some tips about how you get your action shots? How do you get the dogs in focus rather than the background? Great question. More than happy to talk about that. And so let me show you another image, because that's kind of partly what I want to talk about next. So let me bear with me a second. Let's have a look. Right, here we go. So there's little Arlo having a run. So I can answer this question and talk about the other part of what I wanted to talk about today, which was dealing with bad or awkward light. Now, in photography, in terms of light, they say the golden hour is the best. So that's typically the first hour and last hour of light in the day. And it's true for two reasons, really. One is it's a warmer, more flattering light, and the light source, i.e. the sun, is much lower. So at sunset, it's pretty level if you're looking at it, and at sunrise, it's the same. As the light rises during the course of the day, so this is probably this shot here with Arlo. I met them at 9 o'clock. Probably should have done it a bit earlier, actually. And by the time we were doing this, it was probably 10, and the sun was quite bright. So it wasn't midday sun, so it wasn't above us, but it was on its way up. And that creates quite a challenge because it gives you a harsh kind of light, which, can cause some problems. And the main problem it can cause with action photography is if you look at this dog here on his face on the left-hand side, as you're looking at him, it's quite light. Now, I've edited it, obviously, so this is a sort of a finished image. But when the sensor's looking at these sort of bright areas, it can't see any detail, so it can be quite difficult for it to focus. And it's very contrasty light. So from an action shot point of view, it can be challenging. And the same is true if it's a portrait shot. And, like here's the portrait one I did. And all I did there is brought them forward from the sunshine at the back here. As you can see, there's their welly. And so a little bit of shade, if you can find it. So the easiest thing to do with bad light is to get out of it if you can. Have a look around. There's always somewhere where you can move, generally speaking, and get shady or dappled light. But I'm leaving Megan's question up there because I know I haven't answered it properly yet. So in terms of action shots, I use single point focus. So I don't use the multiple groups. So where I point the camera, which is normally here, if you can. Obviously, the small dog running is difficult, and so it takes practice to get the spot where you want it. But single point focus, continuous focus in terms of the system on the camera. So that's what it's called on a Nikon, or on a Canon, it's called AI servo. Why they call it that, don't know. But yeah, continuous focus. And so when I've got the shutter button pressed, and I use back button focus, but we won't worry about that yet. It's constantly tracking whatever the focus point is locked on at. Now, with an image like this, where you've got contrasty light, if the dog was running in directly at me, and there were plenty of opportunities in this field. Let's get rid of that question now. Bear with me a second. What's it gone? Right. There were plenty of opportunities in that field to have him running directly at me with the sun directly behind me. And some people would say that's what you should always do. And in generally speaking, you do want the light behind you, unless you're doing some creative backlit shots. But what I've done here, and it's quite a subtle thing, is I've had the dog run sort of slightly angular to the sun. And that creates, from an image point of view, you're seeing he's lit on his left and he's dark on his right. And obviously the image, when it was in the back of the camera, it was quite a bit dark on his right and quite a bit light on his left. So rather than change the angle, I've used it because it helps the focus system. So when the focusing spot is on his nose or on his eyes there's a light bit of fur, and then there's a dark bit of fur where the shadow creates, and the focusing system will grab that. A one color dog, black dog particularly, but even a dog of this color, the focus system can't see contrast. So what it's doing is creating an area for me to lock on to focus. He didn't have his tongue out. So that's another little reason that I would do it for. So let's have a look at what other questions we got here. Let's have a look. So Sue, do you have any idea when the courses will be back on? That's a good question, actually. Workshops. I've got a few people that we had to cancel because of lockdown. I'm expecting in a matter of weeks, actually. So I had a conversation with the venue, which is down the road from me the other day, and they are obviously taking government guidelines. So they are a restaurant hotel with a bar. So there's a reasonable chance they could open quite soon. So hopefully in the very, very near future, hopefully, because I'm looking forward to getting those done. So Adam's got a question here. Adam Boo, thanks for your question. Just starting out, just wondering what lens you would say to get first and build up from that, if that makes sense. Good question, Adam. And I would sort of throw it back to you. It kind of depends on kind of the type of camera, but what you're going to do, what kind of photography you're going to do. So I'll answer it in two ways. If you were saying to me sort of a general walking around wildlife stuff and action photography and dogs and stuff, then I would say a 70-200, which is the lens I've always got on my camera all the time. Love it. It gives me a good range, not too big and easy to carry around. If you want more general photography, sort of portraiture, landscapes, stuff like that, then I would in terms of a zoom lens, it gives you a bit of range. A 24-70 or 16-35 is quite good. The other one though that is often underestimated is the good old 50mm lens, which on a full frame camera like mine is, in terms of the angle of view, is pretty much what we see as a human. So as you're looking around, a 50mm lens will create the same. So I've sort of answered three things for you there. There's a little comment from Tom. Is that a question? Oh no, brief human conversation. Yeah, we were chatting the other night. Had my first playing kayak with dogs, went smashing them up. Brilliant, great stuff, Tom. Congratulations. It's always good to hear because I certainly remember my first paying client. Alan Ward, I'll pop him up just so you know his name. Look him up. There's a little picture on his profile there. He's an avid wildlife outdoors fisherman, wildlife photographer, and so he runs workshops up in Scotland, and he and I quite often do them together now. So we're often up in the depths of Scotland chasing around wildlife. Right, let's go back to some of these images. So in terms of where's it gone? Banner images. Where am I? Right. Okay. So in terms of the light, you can see there's different. So this one's bright light. So I've explained there what I've done. From a metering point of view, I would have underexposed that one slightly. So rather than change, because the area around the dog is darker, the metering is going to measure this, because metering cameras see in black and white, and the metering, which is set to evaluative, is metering the entire frame. So it's looking at that image and measuring the light. And this is edited, obviously, but unedited, there's quite a very significant amount of brightness in the middle. So set in normal metering mode, that's going to underexpose the entire image because it's compensating for the bright bit in the middle. So what I do is I underexpose it slightly as well by setting the exposure compensation button, even little plus minus button on the top of the camera somewhere, on the minus, on the back somewhere. And what that does is say meter as normal, but overexposed by whatever I set it to. So I turned it down slightly to get that image. And the other thing you can do, so what I did with this dog, because he's a puppy who run all over the place, you can sort of see in the image that he's running down what looks like a bit of a track. So that is something that is definitely worthwhile doing. If you can get the dog to do a couple of runs to see which way he goes and where he's going to be, so that you can be set right with the zoom at you where you want to do it, or take the image and be ready for the shot. And then this one, again, in terms of light, I would have overexposed this very slightly. So this goes back to the thing we were talking about on one of the other webinars, which is a thing that is often known in the industry as ETTR, exposed to the right, which basically means just expose it over slightly. And the reason I do that is so that when I come to edit it in Lightroom, I'm turning the image, so the image as it came out of the camera is slightly bright. When you edit it in Lightroom, you're turning it down slightly. And when you turn an image down slightly, I know it's a bit more complex than that because it's all the different sliders, but broadly, if you're turning the exposure down slightly or the shadows down slightly, that doesn't add noise. Whereas if this was the other way around and really dark, which it would have been because of the bright pathway in the background, then turning it up will add a bit of noise. And that's, noise is our enemy. We don't want noise unless you've got some creative reason for having it in an image in black and white. So I hope that helps there. Now, there was another question in terms of action shots. Where was it? An image I put up the other day. Yeah, here we go. This is quite a popular one. So this is one of those rare occasions. I didn't use it. I used single point focus because I'm so used to using it. But some people say to me, well, are there occasions when you would use multiple points? And so what I mean by that is, say, most cameras have got more than one focus point. I think mine's got 64 or something ridiculous like that. So if you switch them all on, then in auto mode, in terms of the focusing system, it will grab onto something it thinks is appropriate and track it. Now, it might have worked in this image, but the only time I would use it is typically birds in flight, where you've got birds against a sky background, where the focus points are going to lock onto what the camera, because cameras don't know what these things are they're looking at. It's going to lock onto a subject of contrast and track it until it sees something more interesting or that's nearer. Now, in a sky scenario, there isn't going to be anything else, unless you suddenly get a helicopter in the way or anything like that. And this one, though, probably would be okay, but as you can see in the background, there's some yellow, which is, I think it was heather or poppies or something like that. There's a fence post just below his wing there. So in auto mode, I wouldn't have known, I couldn't have been confident that it wasn't going to suddenly shoot into the background and grab those yellow things or the fence posts or branches that are in the bottom. So I prefer to use single point focus. I use it for dog photography and for my paid work all the time. I say that, a slight caveat, a small little Jack Russell, a small dog running quite fast on grass where it's a nice bland sort of background, I might try that, because a single point focus on a small terrier running like a nutter all over the place can be challenging. Here's another one. I know I shared this one the other week, but this is another one of those capturing the moment shots with a nice little catch light, which Sheena asked about. And again, this is actually slightly set up because I do this shot quite a lot now. I just say to the customer, look, if you stand over there, look away from me, I get 3 or 4 meters back, 2 or 3 meters away. And I just say, stick the dog over your shoulder. And I don't normally ask the dog to do anything. I don't squeak at it or call it. I just see what it does. And this one did lots of different expressions. And then it did that, and I captured that. So, that worked quite well. So let's have a look at some of the questions we've got coming in here. Here we go. Megan's another question. I like it, Megan. I love all the questions. So my camera only has 7 frames per second. Would you say it's important to invest in a camera that has a higher for action shots, such as 11 frames per second? A good question. So this thing, the 1DX, let me just give you that image a minute. So this 1DX beast of a thing does 14 frames a second or 16 in live view. So the answer is, well, there's 2 answers to that really. The first one is, yes, if your speciality, if what you do as a hobby or a business is largely action shots, so wildlife photography, chasing things that are moving quickly, dog photography, dogs running around quickly, then I'd certainly consider it. The only difference is, so when I first started dog photography, I've had this 1DX for a couple of years. So 3 of those years, I was using a 5D Mark III, which shoots at, I think, 5 frames a second or 6 frames a second. So it's a great full frame camera, but shoots at a slower frame rate. So the only difference at 7 frames per second and 11 frames per second is the obvious thing, the amount of images you're going to get in a run. So with my 5D, all I was doing was having to do 3 or 4 more runs of a dog to get the perfect shot with the ears up in the air or the tail or whatever. So it's kind of a qualified answer. You don't need to. You can get, I've done some photography, I haven't got the image here, where I use single shot. And I did this in an experiment to demonstrate to somebody about how you can get an action shot at a really slow shutter speed. So I shot a Labrador jumping over a fence with a dummy in its mouth, and I shot it at 6/40th of a second, which just should not work, and 1 shot. And what happened there is I knew he was going to jump over the fence, and as the dog, there's a point at which when the dog's jumping a high fence, he's almost stopped. So he jumps before he comes down. So I got the shot there. So that's 1 frame a second. So I know I'm whittling on a bit there. So the answer is kind of depends, I suppose, what you want to do. Most cameras that have fast frames per second typically have other features that go with it that are worth considering. So I certainly wouldn't rule it out. So I hope that answers that question, Megan. Let's have a look. Ooh. Hello, Sophie. Welcome. Do you use additional flashlights on your outdoor shots? No. I have the equipment to do that kind of stuff. Let me just show you this a minute. This is not a flashlight. I do have off-camera flash, and I don't carry it around with me anymore. But in core light, I bought this, which is a rotor light. It's quite small, and it has switch it on. You can turn the temperature up. I won't point it at the camera because it will kill you, but you can turn it up and down in terms of brightness, and you can turn the. You can't probably see that. You won't be able to see it. But you can turn the color temperature up and down. So I occasionally have that with me on those sort of wintry days where it's going to be a little bit overcast. So that can be handy just to help create the catch lights that Sheena asked about. But generally speaking, I would use that. I think I've used it twice in a couple of years. So it's not something I use a lot. Hope that answers your question, Sophie. Next question. Let's have a look. Oh, hang on. Philippa. Hello, Philippa. When using back button focus, do you keep the button held down, or will it track the subject if you press it once? Great question. Something that people get quite stuck on quite regularly. So for those of you who don't know what back button focus is, it is what it says. Normally, every camera, when you get it out of the factory, it's bizarre using this thing because it comes out of a. So the shutter here, ding ding, the thing you press to take the picture is also what activates the focusing system, whether it's one shot or tracking. You have the ability to set on the back of the camera, any of these buttons on most cameras. There's one here that says AF on, so I've used that button to do the focusing for you. So what you're going to do there is assign, we'll change the structure of the camera slightly. So your shutter button then, when you half press it, switches it on, wakes it up and starts metering. And then when you fully press it, it takes a picture. And if you've got it set as the factory settings, it will also keep the metering going, so keep the focusing going. In back button focus, it doesn't do that. You have to press the back button, and it gives you complete control over focusing. Something I'd recommend people try because I love it. And it's a bit of a Marmite thing. Not everybody likes it, but 80% of people I've come across who've tried it reckon it transforms their photography. So definitely try it. But to answer your question, Philippa, if you're not pressing the button, the focusing is not going to work. So it's something that people do a lot. They'll set back button focus up, and they'll press it once to sort of get it in focus, and then forget to press it, and so nothing's going to happen. So it's a common mistake. So yeah, keep it pressed if you want to track the subject. The time when you don't do that is when you want to pre-focus. So if you want to focus on a dog that's to the left of the frame, you can use your back button focus, put the spot on the dog, press the button, let go, and then focus stays where it is, and you just recompose and move your lens to the middle. So you've got it composed. So I hope that answers your question. Hi, Janka. I hope I pronounced that correctly. What aperture generally would you recommend for action shots of dogs running and jumping? That's a good question, and there's two answers to that. One is the aperture you need is the brightest one you need to get the light you need, and the amount of light you need is driven by the shutter speed that you want, which kind of makes sense, I think. So I'm going to shoot at a shutter speed of 1600 per second. So it's going to tell me, looking at the metering in the camera, that, and I shoot in shutter priority, so I pick the shutter speed of say 1600 per second, and the aperture will then be at whatever it is based on the ISO. So if I put the ISO down at say 100, and the aperture is at say 2.8, I'm happy with that. But if the aperture is at 7 or 8, that will still work, but from a creative point of view, the image you're going to get will have a lot in focus, and so it doesn't pop, it doesn't look quite so exciting. So I tend to shoot as low as I suppose the answer to your question is I'll shoot at the lowest aperture I can, given the lens I've got, because not every lens will shoot at 2.8. Some lenses are 3 or 4 or 5, and the available light, and limiting the ISO as much as possible. So if the ISO says, if it's a really overcast day and it's dark in the woods, and I need to be at 1600, and the ISO says I've got to be at 10, on my camera I can get away with it, but on most cameras, the ISO's at 5000. I probably wouldn't be taking the images because they would just be really noisy. Let's have a little look. Here's a good question. Tom says, how do you balance your time between a busy photography business, workshops, and the new academy? And what is your average working week like with all this going on? Busy. That's my average working week. It works fine because as we are, in terms of the academy, we're with all the founding members in at the moment, and we're opening the doors again on the 1st of July. And so if you're not on our membership database, get to the website. The first thing you'll see is a click to add yourself on. I don't spam loads of emails, but that's where we'll be sending stuff out. We'll put stuff on Facebook as well to tell people we're opening on the 1st of July. These are the new prices and these are the offers to take advantage of. And so there's a lot of work at the moment getting it all set up. The webinars that we record with members are now appearing in the gallery. But over time, that will become easier because a lot of the content will already be there. Photography workshops, I mean, that's a couple of days out. One of the things that, as a photographer, irrespective of the workshops and this academy, I've got 23,000 odd people on my Facebook page and I get in comments and questions all the time. So I've always got this with me, and wherever I go socially, I have to accept that as part of my business, social media is a huge part of that. And as a result, the busiest time of that tends to be the evenings, and you get a bit of lunchtime in the morning, but evenings are when people are online asking questions and stuff. So it just goes with the territory, really. So it's busy, keeps me on my toes, which is great. I mean, I love it. And it does help really enjoying what you do, because otherwise it becomes a grind. Here we go. I hope that answers your question, Tom. Let's have a look. Hi, Lisa. What is the best aperture? What is the best way to ensure your dog's eyes are in focus? Okay. Well, I touched on that in the previous question, actually, is just to make sure that that's what you're aiming the camera at. So I use single point focus and I aim at the eyes. If I used a group of focus points or auto, the focusing systems tend to get whatever's nearest. So if I'm a dog, it would grab my nose. Now, shooting at f2.8 at quite close distances, you can have an inch or two's worth of depth of field. So the nose would be sharp and the eyes wouldn't. Or if I get the forehead sharp and the top of the head is, but the eyes aren't. So in simple terms, single point focus and aim at the dog. Hello, Jane. Now, Jane Hodges is a professional dog photographer. I met in 2016 before she became a professional dog photographer, and she's doing exceptionally well now. So find her Facebook page and have a little look. But anyway, her question, are you shooting in full auto or AV or TV? So I shoot in, I don't use auto anymore. I used to when I first started, not a dog photography, but years ago. And a big part of what we do in the academy is help people get off the green auto button and move into either manual or AV or TV, which is Canon speak for aperture priority and shutter priority. I would say 95% of the time I shoot in shutter priority, and I let the camera decide the aperture, but I make sure it's where I want it to be by moving the ISO around, if that helps. Okay, another question. What do you use for storage? Okay. Okay, Sue, I'll come back to that. If you could just clarify what you mean, is that memory storage or equipment storage? So if you just put another comment in and clarify what you mean by that, I'll answer it. And if you don't, I'll answer both in a second. Another question here from Tim. Doing well today. Certainly we're doing all these at lunchtime, I think, because we've got more people on than we normally get, which is brilliant. Hi, Tim, thanks for the question. So what lenses do you typically use? Well, when I first started, I used to go to the photography show or to Jessop's and I bought stuff. I mean, I spent a fortune on gear. My favorite lens now, which I use 99% of the time, is this one on here, the Canon 70-200. I'm on a full frame camera, so the effective focal length is 70-200, and I use that all the time. The only other lens, and I don't actually have one at the moment, I would have in my arsenal would be a 24-70 or a 16-35, and that would suit my kind of photography. Now, some people have different kind of photography. So, like if you're into wildlife photography, then you'll probably when I do that, I hire lenses. So I'll go and hire a 300mm or 400mm lens because I don't want to spend 10 grand on something I'm going to use for a weekend. And we're building a relationship with a company that does all that. So we'll get discounted for members, discounted hire rates, which is quite a good way of using long lenses or trying out equipment before you buy it. So those are the typical lenses I use, but it kind of comes down to what kind of photography you do. So Sue's question, processing in Lightroom, do you use external hard drives? Yes, I do. I've got, you can't see it, but right next to me here is an iMac, which I do pretty much all my editing on now. And it's got a 1 terabyte hard drive on it, which gets filled up quite quickly. So I use, make sure one of these isn't connected. Let's pull it out. These are my favourite. So I forget what they call them, but they're Lacey USB hard drives, and I think they're called, I'll find a link and pop it in the thing later, but they're rugged. And I think they even come with some kind of guarantee. So that if you damage the hard drive, Lacey will do a recovery for you and get it off there. But they're pretty robust. This is like a rubber neoprene sort of character thing. So, I mean, these are actually on my desk, but when I go away to Scotland, I tend to take one of these with me because I'm using the Mac that I'm broadcasting to you now from. And that actually is a 256 gig hard drive. So a few raw images and it'll fill up very quickly. Now, in terms of the other point on your question there that I think it's worth touching on, when it comes to editing, I tend to edit on the native hard drive, as in, what I mean by that is the hard drive that's in the computer. Because depending on the specification, and then I'll save them to a separate hard drive as this thing gets filled up, because depending on the specification of the hard drive, the remote hard drive, and the speed it operates at, that can have an effect. So if you're editing in Lightroom and the images are actually on a separate drive and it's not particularly fast, you can get quite a lot of lag. So I tend to edit actually on the computer I'm working on and then save them from a storage point of view somewhere else. Linda, good question. I use a company called Lenses for Hire in Maidenhead. Absolutely brilliant. And that's the company I'm going to have a chat with and get a sort of a deal set up for our members where they get a bit of a discount and so on. But he's brilliant. The lenses, he's got an Aladdin's cave of gear. Pretty much everything you can think of, he's got there. Right. Alison Hutchins. Hello, Alison. My camera came with a screw-on hood. I've had that on all the time in my auto photography to date. Now I'm in manual. Should I keep it on or not? Shouldn't make any difference. The hood is, and I'm assuming by that what you mean is this thing, that sits on the end. They do two things. One is they protect the lens. So if you drop it, whatever, that's not going to break and not your lens. But the other thing is they help stop sort of reflections and refractions on the lens. So definitely keep it on there. It doesn't make any difference what settings you've got. So yeah, hope that answers that one. Oh, I'm loving all these questions, guys. This is brilliant. Right. Don't apologise, Philippa. That's why I do these. Do you use anything to protect the body of your lens when you're out, or do you not feel it's necessary? That's a good question, actually. Now, I sort of look after my gear. I mean, this 1DX, you could literally, you couldn't play football with it, but it's so robust, it's untrue. But as you can see on here, this is the Canon 70-200, so it's a classic white. You can see under there, it's the classic white lens thing. But I've got a lens coat on it, which you probably can't see it, but it's got it's that camo on the inside. So I've just turned it round, and I leave it on there because it does two things. It protects the lens from scratches and stuff, so why not? But it also makes the lens slightly more comfortable to hold because it's neoprene and it's soft. So on cold days when you're out, it keeps it warm. So the answer is yes. I like to sort of look after my gear where I can and protect it because you invest a lot of money in it. That lens is a few grand's worth. So and ultimately when you come to upgrade to the next one, when you want to sell it, keep the box, and if it hasn't got any marks on it, you're going to get a bit more value. Mark Howling is just saying he's used Lenses for Hire, very good. Jane, it's another good question. I'm glad you asked this one, Jane. So the answer is I do. So there's two answers there. There's two types of filters out there. There's filters that do stuff. So like graduated filters you might use for landscape that are dark, color filters and stuff. But I think where Jane's going, in terms of protection, I use, you can't really see it on there, but there's on top of this, there's a screw-in filter. Which is what that is. And this is a UV filter, so it really, it filters out UV light, so it'll improve the image quality marginally, but it's very difficult to see. But what it does do is it protects the end of this lens. So this is, my pride and joy. I use it for everything, and I don't want that lens getting damaged or scratched. So I'd rather replace the filter than replace the element on the end. It's all insured, but what I do is if I'm going to spend £2 on Canon's flagship 70-200 Mark III lens, I'm not going to put a Hoya £10 filter on the end. This is what they call a X Pro Digital, so it's got nano coating on it and stuff like that. It's made of Jones glass, obviously, and it's a company called BW. So it's about 100 odd quid's worth of filter, and the coatings it's got on it are a similar quality to what you find in the lens. So when it gets water on it, it beads off, and if you're using a lens cloth on it, if you scratch it, you can replace it. So I'm a fan of that. Some photographers will say the opposite. Say, no, you should never use a filter. It can degrade the image quality. And if you use a cheap one, it certainly can. But, I use an expensive one. This thing is another way of protecting the lens. So, if you've got a filter on there and that, you're pretty covered. Right, what else have we got here? Bit of a random, but my filter stuck on my... Oh, that's awful, that is. Yeah, if it's cross-threaded, as in it's gone in at a funny angle, you're just going to have to sort of try really hard to get it off. If it's just on tight, because they can get, and some of the less expensive ones, I mean, this is glass, not glass, this even though it's black on the edge of here, you can see that it's black, it's actually brass, so it's high quality. Even that can get a bit tight. So when you do them up, don't do them up like overly tight, just thumb tight. Difficult. I mean, I'd be very careful. I don't know what I do, because obviously if it's broken and you need to get it off, then you could take it to a camera, something like Fixation in London. They will probably be able to help you do it. If it were me, I mean, I'm not sure I'd recommend doing it, but I might be tempted to get a little cotton bud and maybe try a little bit of something like WD-40 or something like that, just very carefully around the edge, just to get that soaking in. It might give you just enough lubrication in there, or just a little bit of water with a bit of sort of fairy liquid in it or something, just to see if that helps. But yeah, it's not uncommon, and so I feel your pain. But yeah, hope that helps. Here we go. Do you use, Megan? I love all the questions, Megan. Do you use a microfiber cloth to clean your UV filter or anything? And do you recommend anywhere for second-hand gear? So yes, I've always got a microfiber cloth in my pocket, and when I'm out shooting. So yeah, I use that, and that's another one of the benefits of having that filter on the end, because it's got really good sort of water, what they call hydrophobic properties, so stuff beads like water off a duck's back, so that's quite handy. It's amazing how much rubbish you can have on a lens and it still not overly affect the image quality, but it does have an effect. And in terms of second-hand gear, yes, I mean, there's all the places. I mean, I bought stuff off eBay, so the only caveat I'd say with eBay is to be very careful, because what people say about something and what it actually is can be quite often very different. There's Park Cameras, who are a company, an independent, brilliant business. They've got a shop in East Grinstead, a shop in, not East Grinstead, down Crawley, one in London, and an online presence, and they do used equipment with a warranty. MPB, which I think are down in Brixham of all places. I've heard good reviews about them. And I think even Wex Photography now, which is one of the biggest online ones out there, they do use gear. So yeah, it's definitely plenty of places to do it, and it's a good way of getting equipment. Some gear though isn't always that much less used than new, and it's just something to think about, depending on the kind of equipment it is. Here we go. This looks like a good one. Hello, Tom. Right, after a shoot, do you allocate a set amount of time for sorting through and editing clients' photos, or do you simply take as long as it takes, depending on how many photos you've taken? No, I don't allocate a set amount of time. It's a good point. It does take as long as it takes. And I've got very efficient with it now. And one of the things I might do on one of these webinars is just show people, not the editing, because that will take quite a while, but the process I do to import and organize images, because over the years, I've been through quite a lot of different ways of doing that. And I can import images into my, onto the hard drive and into Lightroom and get them sorted. And the ones I think I want to edit, out of a shot of say 800 down to say 100 or so, probably in half an hour. And then it's to sit down and editing, and that can take, days sometimes, depending on how much time I want to spend on images. So I hope that answers the question. Tim, yeah, no, I don't do my own printing. I don't sell prints anyway. So most of my clients buy frames and wall art, or digital products, or a combination of both. So I don't. There are some pretty good printers out there, as in printers you can buy. I tend to think that some of the labs that are out there. I mean, I use a company called Loxley up in Scotland, and brilliant. And so you can order a print from there today, and it'll be in first class post tomorrow, or via DPD courier if it's that important. And it costs probably a little bit more than printing, but the overall hassle factor is significantly reduced. There we go. Another question, Jeffrey. Welcome. I love your work. Thank you. Can I ask, when taking a picture of a dog in action, do you try to get to the level of height that? Yes. Now, I've touched on this before, and this is true of any kind of photography: wildlife photography, portrait photography, weddings, dogs. You need to be at the level of the subject. Now, with dogs, that means getting on the ground. So I'm quite often, I come back from a photo shoot, I'm knackered, because it is hard work, but also because I've been lying down, I've been kneeling down and rolling around. And the difference of a dog image, the same dog taken with the same settings, stood up, if it's a portrait one, for example, stood up, or me lying down transforms the image. It absolutely makes a massive difference. So I always recommend doing that. And it's one of the biggest things you can do without having to worry about settings. So if you've got your settings roughly right, but you get into the frame of the dog and the angles, that can transform an image. So yes, good question. When you get back to training, will you do? Yes, that's a good point, actually. I'm IPS. So this is for the pros out there. In-person sales is what that stands for. I'm changing that this year, actually. So I am going to be doing a training module on that because there's kind of two models in terms of professional photography that people work on in terms of interacting with clients. So both models have the same thing, that you're going to take the photos either in a studio or outdoors. So that's point one. Point two is you're going to get them edited and put them in a gallery. And then you've got two different ways of processing that next step to ultimately lead to the order. One is what I do at the moment, which is where I'll create the gallery, I send the client a link to that, and I send them a guide in terms of prices and products, and then we have a remote conversation via email and messenger about what package they might want to buy. And that works for me. It's quite hard, so you need to be quite adept at sales and various techniques. There's a lot involved to make sure you get the order values you want, because of course you're doing it remotely. In-person sales is, instead of doing that step, you invite them back to your office or to your gallery or your studio, and you do a reveal. So a cup of coffee and a biscuit, nice big TV on the wall, and you go through the 20 or 30 images. And then of course in that environment you have all your samples there, you've got products on the wall that you can show people, and typically people spend quite a lot more money in that environment, but of course it's face to face, so it's selling. And one thing I can guarantee with photographers, not everybody, but the vast majority of photographers are creative art people, and they're not always adept at selling and the techniques required for in-person sales. So to answer your question, Jane, without whittling on, absolutely we'll be doing that. In fact, I'm planning to do a whole session on a whole kind of series of workshops on sort of the business side of things. So refocusing on social media advertising, marketing, getting leads, managing leads, in-person sales, closing the sale, and all that kind of stuff, because it can take somebody's average sale in dog photography world from £500 a month, £500 an order to 5,000. And I've had clients spend even more than that, so it's very doable. Right, here we go. Here's a good question, Tim. How do you handle client requests for studio type shots, high key, low key, etc.? Well, people come to me because they know what my style and what kind of photography I do. So I don't do studio shots. I will do the kind of shots that you often see that on my Facebook page, where there's sort of like a dark background, which is what I call studio in the field. There are types of photography you can do outdoors that has a studio effect to it, but that's kind of how I handle that. But if they specifically want studio shots with different backdrops and stuff, then that's not the kind of photographer I do. So I thank them for their time and sort of usually give them some advice as other photographers do that too. Right, another question, of course, is brilliant. Lisa, thank you, welcome. What do you use to share your images with clients? So I put them on my website. So if you look at my website, www.carlthomasphotography.co.uk, there's a thing that says browse galleries, and there's a few galleries in there for my portfolio, which I must update. I haven't done it for ages. So some action shots and portraits, and then there's all the client galleries, and they've all got passwords on. And so clients go there, find their gallery, log in, and have a little look. So that's kind of how I do that. I'm not sure if I've got any more questions. If anyone's got any, please pop them in. Obviously, I shall look at this feed during the course of the next couple of days anyway. Keep my eye on it. So any more questions that pop in after, more than welcome to drop them in. I'll try and answer them. But I'm just checking through how I've done these. Thank you, Tim. I'll pop that up there. It's a nice thing for you to say. It's very kind of you. Yeah, I think we've kind of covered most of these here. So, so the only thing to say then, really, I've had a lot of questions recently, which is exciting, about people saying, so this academy, love it. I've been on the website, but I can't join. And the answer to that is we are opening the doors again in July, on July the 1st, which is a couple of weeks away, I think, slightly. And it will be open for 4 days and then closed again. And the reason I do that, to answer the question, and it kind of goes back to one of the questions that somebody asked earlier about time. So what I want to do is be able to give members time. And so if I leave that membership open constantly, I daily be welcoming new members and spending time getting to know them. But what I want to do is spend time with the existing members. So at the moment, we've got the members that joined as a founding member. and I've spent a lot of time with them doing one-to-one chats, creating content, and that's an ongoing thing and will continue to go on. And then we open the doors for 4 days from the 1st of July, and we'll get another group of members in, and we'll shut the doors so that we can spend time getting to know each other, getting them integrated with the other members that are in the group on the Facebook page and equipment. For a few people, the Nikon 850 is a recent, it's the 850, and there's a few people with the same camera I have got, so I try to connect them so that they've got things in common. So that's why we close the doors, because it's all about the members and not about, I mean, it is commercially and people pay to join, so that's fine, but it's about adding value and giving content to people. So it opens again on the 1st of July. If you want to make sure I mean, I'll post stuff on Facebook and social media, but if you want to make sure you're on the website, www.carlthomasphotography, I'll put a little thing up when this is finished, which has got the website on it, and go on there and you'll see the website, and I think one of the first links you'll see is add yourself to the list, which is a mailing list that I've got, which I use to communicate about these webinars. So I'll pop little notes out about when we're doing these free webinars, because these are free, they're not part of the membership. We do much more detailed stuff in the membership. And I'll be telling people about the 1st of July launch, the webinars leading up to that, and about more information, obviously, about the options that are available and the offers that may or may not exist for new members. So it's important. I don't spam people with loads of emails because I know it drives people nuts. So I think I've had like 1 or 2 unsubscribes in the last 6 months, and that's it. So get yourself on there. Let's have a little look. You got any more questions? Nope, doesn't look like it. So I'll thank you for your time. There we go. Here's me saying half an hour. It's not going to happen, is it? It's 57 minutes and 20 seconds so far. So these always end up being an hour, but it's brilliant. So if it's an hour, I don't mind if it's 2 hours, frankly. But there's a lot of people on looking at the little eye thing I can see. Lots of questions, lots of likes. So it's great fun. And I'm doing it. Sorry, forgot to mention it. Doing another one of these on Thursday, which is the 18th, a couple of days from now, or at 7 p.m. So it'll be interesting to see how many people we get on that versus this time of day, because this has certainly proved quite popular, which is encouraging. So yeah, there's another webinar, and we'll do the same format. I'll talk about me a little bit, 2 seconds about me, a little bit about Beyond the Lens Academy, and then questions and answers, and I'll pick up some different images and just put things on there and just chat through it. So don't think there's any more questions. No, there isn't. So thanks for your time. Thanks for joining. I hope you have a great, hi Ben, hope you have a great day, the rest of the day, whatever it is now. Here we go, 1 o'clock. And we will catch up soon. So let me just put this little thing up, which has got, let me find it, bear with me. It is not that one, it is that one. So see you later, and I'll leave this running now for a minute, which will give you ability to write down the website if you need to. Thanks a lot, bye.